Hey, how we doing everybody? This is Chris Duffy with Pioneer Property Partners and Atlas Bay Commercial. Today I'm going to make a video discussing cap rate and yield on cost, which are a couple different ways to evaluate a piece of commercial real estate. So by and large, the way commercial real estate is evaluated is by its income. So unlike single family homes, commercial real estate is too different and unique, so the comparable sales approach that they use in residential real estate doesn't really apply to commercial real estate. Therefore, brokers and investors typically use the income approach to evaluate the value or the price of a piece of commercial real estate. So you may have heard of cap rate before. It's a pretty widely used industry term. And cap rate is short for capitalization rate, and essentially the way you arrive at your cap rate is you take the net operating income and you divide it by the purchase price. Okay, so what that means is, in a nutshell, you have X amount of income coming in from a property, that's your gross income. Then you subtract out all of your operating expenses. You don't include the payment to the bank. All right, so you got your gross income, subtract out everything such as maintenance, taxes, insurance, property management, whatever you need to operate the property. Subtract all of that out. That's going to bring you to your NOI, your net operating income. So then once you have your net operating income, you divide that by the purchase price of the property to determine the cap rate. So let's pretend that you're looking at a property where the seller is asking $1 million, okay? After looking at the financials, you determine that that property is producing $80,000 a year annually of net operating income. Remember, you subtracted out all the expenses, all right? You would then determine that if you were to purchase that property for $1 million, you'd be paying an 8% cap rate. What does that mean? It means a couple of different things, and it's kind of a controversial term in the industry. A lot of people say it means that that's kind of your unlevered return on the property. So if you didn't go get a bank loan, you'd be earning 8% on your money. The cap rate also sort of serves as like a barometer for markets. And what I mean by that is kind of like, if you're looking at a market and you see that lots of different properties are trading for an 8% cap rate, let's pretend this is a multifamily building. That means that investors in that market are expecting an 8% return on their money for that market. So cap rates are different across every market. For example, they're lower in big cities like San Francisco and New York. They're higher in small markets, maybe like a rural area of Kansas, something like that. So that's kind of just the high level on cap rate. I can go into it in more detail, but I'll save that for another video. What I want to talk about next is yield on cost, because yield on cost kind of takes the cap rate a step further. And by and large, most investors that you'll meet are what are called value add investors. And all that really means is they're the type of investors that want to purchase a property that's either underperforming or they get it at a good rate. And then they go in, they make some improvements or they raise rents, they add value add, and then they exit on it and essentially collect the difference, where they refi out of it, they pull money out because now the property is worth a lot more. So yield on cost, in my opinion, is a little more precise, because yield on cost takes into account total acquisition costs plus what are called capital expenditures. So CapEx for short, and all that really is again, making improvements to a property. So it's a little bit like looking out into the future and trying to make a determination or an estimate, also known as a pro forma, of what that property is going to be worth after you do X, Y, and Z to it. So for example, let's say that you find a property and you say, hey, you know, all the tenants' rents are under market, and if it's a multifamily building, for example, let's say, oh, you know, all the units can be renovated. We could put new kitchens or bathrooms, flooring, paint, whatever in there. You can improve, add value to the property, and say, hey, we can charge more for rent after we make all of these improvements. i.e. charging more for rent means boosting the income of the property. Again, commercial real estate by and large is evaluated based on its income. All right, so let's take this property here, but instead let's pretend that you bought this $1 million property, but it's gonna take you $200,000 in extra costs to then boost the new net operating income by $20,000 a year annually. So total new costs not only might include those capital expenditure costs for like construction and things like that, it would include closing costs, it might include attorney's fees or something like that. It's kind of an all-in cost. let's say on this property, again, you're all in now for the $1 million purchase price plus the $200,000 in acquisition and capital expenditure costs. So that means you're all in at 1.2, but your new NOI, so your new net operating income now is $100,000. So you're still going to use that same little equation here. You're going to divide the new NOI by the total all-in purchase price plus all the costs I mentioned. And for this example, your new yield on cost, it's going to be 8.33%. So now that percentage is higher, but was it really worth doing all of that work? Well, the answer is it kind of depends. It's a little bit subjective. So some people might say, yeah, I put in all that work, but now I'm enjoying a higher return. And that's all fine, but now pretend that you want to go sell this same property. You've done all this work to it, you've increased the NOI, you've put a lot of effort into it, you spent money, and now you want to go and sell it. You want to cash out of it. Well, if this is an 8 cap market, right? So remember I said that the cap rate is kind of like a barometer. It's sort of like testing what other investors are willing to pay in a specific market. Well, if you know that investors are typically paying 8 caps in your market and you've boosted the NOI now to 100,000 and you exit at an 8 cap, that's going to make your new evaluation 1.25 million. Just again, we're using round numbers here, but ballpark, that's what it's going to be. Because all you're really doing to reverse engineer that number is you're taking that cap rate, right, and you're dividing that NOI by the cap rate. That's how I got 1.25 million. Well, that's only $50,000 more than you were really all in at. So again, it's a little subjective. Some people might say, 50 grand, that was worth my time. Others would say, I'm not even gonna lift a finger for 50 grand. But just hypothetically, let's pretend you know that you could sell this at a 7 cap or a 6 cap. Maybe it's a more competitive market. And so you say, well, I know I could sell this thing at a 7 cap to another investor. It's a little more stable. I made all these improvements. They don't really have to worry about too much, because sometimes investors will pay a lower cap rate knowing that they're going to have, let's say, fewer headaches or less work to do on the property. So you say, all right, well, I can sell this thing at a 7 cap because I know it's a 7 cap market. Well, now your valuation's probably going to be a little closer to this figure here, 1.4 million ballpark, right? Or if it's a 6 cap, maybe up closer to 1.6, okay? So you can see it's really going to be kind of subjective and deal specific and market specific. Now these are all hypotheticals, round numbers, right? So none of this is essentially, nothing exists perfectly in a vacuum, essentially. But this is just kind of a round way that investors will think kind of towards the future. Say, okay, if I pick up this property for X, I do X to it, and then down the road, I'm gonna sell it, or I'm gonna go to the bank and I'm gonna refinance it, I'm gonna pull some money out. Here's where I think my valuation is going to be. So this is all projections, it's pro forma, right? So all sorts of things can change. The market can change, something can happen to the property. So it's not a perfect metric, but this is by and large how at least most of the investors I work with, including myself, I am an investor, look at property. So that was just kind of high level. Hopefully you found that relatively informative. Hopefully it made sense. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. Chris at pioneerpropertypartners.net, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.